Mental health in the black community is largely treated as a joke. That's it. That's the opener. Cue the intro. Right now, as you all know, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and mental health is a big talking point among many, as it rightfully should be. But a large community that oftentimes gets completely overlooked is the black community. Everyone is talking about how hashtag Black Lives Matter, and rightfully so, but they oftentimes stop short at making sure those lives are healthy ones. Black Lives Matter shouldn't just be about being alive. There's more to life than just simply living, and I want to look into some of the reasons that I think it's being overlooked, like religion, racism, toxic masculinity, and ignorance, as well as some of my experiences with my mental health in my life and community. Roughly 13% of Americans, or 43 million people, identify as Black or African American, and roughly 16%, or nearly 7 million of those people, have reported having a mental illness within the last year. 7 million people that are just having their mental health undervalued on a massive scale, and it's sadly one of the places that often gets overlooked. If you went to your bank to get $430 of your own money, and your bank teller Susan was like,
"Fuck it, I'm gonna grossly mishandle like 70 of these dollars,"
you'd rightfully be pissed off. You'd want something done about it to make it right, and you'd definitely be calling for Susan's job. So why are we content with letting those $70, or in the case of black people, 7 million people, be recklessly and grossly mishandled and ignored? To put that number in terms that most people will understand, that's roughly the entire populations of Houston or Chicago or Philadelphia. The entire populations. Historical adversity, which includes slavery, sharecropping, and race-based exclusion from health, educational, social, and economic resources, translates into socioeconomic disparities experienced by Black and African American people today. Socioeconomic status, in turn, is linked to mental health. People who are impoverished, homeless, incarcerated, or have substance abuse issues are at a higher risk for poor mental health, and that's largely a problem that the institution of America and many Americans refuse to acknowledge. Racism is definitely an issue in America, as we should all know by now. And in that racism, America has largely schemed against black people by instituting racist policies like redlining, housing discrimination, police brutality, Jim Crow laws, and countless others. Living through many of these issues would begin to grind on the psyche of any people, and to repeatedly do this to a people, the same people, for the entirety of America's existence is disgusting and wrong, but it's also par for the course for America. America oftentimes asks black people to get over slavery and the repeated injustices that we faced, but doesn't actually offer any help or solutions on how that process is supposed to happen. The talk of reparations for what happened to black people is largely scoffed at and dismissed as being unreasonable. So we are often left to our own devices, even though those devices are largely inadequate due to the social and economic structure of America. Many people don't understand just how fucking grating and emotionally taxing racism is on the mental health of those it's constantly forced upon. Systemic, structural, interpersonal, institutional racism and oppression. And no matter how much you try to explain it to people, many people want to make excuses as to why it should continue, dismissing it by saying,
"Well, I don't see color, I don't see race,"
or outright denying it exists while also simultaneously benefiting from it. Meanwhile, those who are most affected are left to pick up the pieces of their lives and mental health after they've been shattered and ground into paste. Those tendrils of racism are deeper and more far-reaching than many people actually want to admit. It reaches into all facets of life when you're black in America. from healthcare and how discrimination plays a part in black mothers being undervalued in the maternity ward, black patients having their pain dismissed because of some preconceived notion that black people naturally have a higher pain threshold, down to how we as a people discipline our children, as black parents are 2 times as likely to participate in spanking or whooping, a 2015 Pew Research survey found. This is also something that ties into religion as well, specifically the King James Version of the Bible, Proverbs 13:24, which roughly translates into spare the rod, spoil the child, which I've heard far too often after being disciplined or watching other black parents discipline their children. I don't believe spanking is a harmless act. I believe that it does way more harm than good, especially on the mental health of young children, and oftentimes makes younger children equate love and caring and discipline with violence. It should be stopped being put into practice by everyone who participates in it. Anyway, according to historians, spanking wasn't even how early captured slaves disciplined their children. Spanking, whooping, busting that ass, or whatever you may personally call it, didn't start for many black people until after slavery in America started, which is just another thing that was thrown upon our people, born of racism, and the cycle just never ended. I can, however, say definitively that when I have my children, that cycle of violence as discipline ends with me. A personal friend told me a great quote. She said, "I don't want my children to have to recover from their childhood." And that quote broke me down and forced me to face what I had been doing to the little humans in my life, as well as what I had already had happen to me when I was a child.
I got spanked and I turned out fine.
Is a phrase that many black people will throw out. But you know what? You shouldn't have fucking had to. There's no reason to hit a child in that way. None. I have a task for those who think otherwise. Replace child with an adult woman. That's it. If a man told his wife to do something and she didn't do it for whatever reason, and he disciplined her by spanking her, is that abuse? And if the answer is yes, then why is that okay to do to a child? Being black in America has always been equated with being strong, facing adversity and not folding under pressure. But why is it our people are always the ones who have to face that kind of adversity? Why is it that we are always forced into being strong, even when it's clearly being detrimental to our mental health? Hell, we can't even protest the repeated disproportional murders of black people by police, those sworn to protect and serve, without someone wanting to co-opt the movement, or worse, dismiss it altogether because
all lives matter.
Yes, all lives do matter, and we as black people already know that. But just like if your wife or girlfriend asked if you loved her and you responded with, "Well, of course, honey, I love everyone." Or when this October hits and it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, it would be highly inappropriate and insanely insensitive to go to a breast cancer survivor patient or rally and start screaming, "All cancer matters." All lives can't matter until Black lives matter. Yes, to those who are watching, I'm fully aware that this is turning into a hit piece about America and its racist history and present. But this isn't what this video is about, I promise. I mean, it kinda is because it clearly needed to be pointed out again, but I also didn't want to spend this much time going over the well-documented history of America and how it was shaped by racism, because far smarter and more qualified people have covered that topic more in depth. However, what I do want to end this section on is that racism and discrimination wears on people, our people, and has long-lasting effects that repeatedly get passed down from generation to generation, because racism is traumatic and has to be dealt with properly as a collective, as a unit, so that the future generations of little black boys and little black girls can and will be better than what the previous generations grew up with. It's up to us, all of us, to make sure that the future is a secure one. Another factor of why mental health in the black community may be getting overlooked is because,
and this is where I'm gonna lose the other 42 people still watching if I haven't already,
religion and the over-reliance on it in our community. I'm not one of those snarky, non-believing bastards trying to artificially put my thumb on the scale by saying,
well, believing in God kinda means you already have a mental illness,
because that would be unfair, and let's be honest, it would be petty as hell. But what I am saying is that it does need to be looked at. 83% of black Americans say that they believe with absolute certainty that a God exists, compared to 59% and 66% of whites and Latinos respectively. 73% of Black Americans pray daily. 75% say religion is very important, and 47%, a number that I was sure was going to be much higher, attend church services weekly. A lot of Black religious people solely rely on their faith in their God to overcome obstacles that they may face. That if they just pray and believe hard enough, that they will come out all right on the other side, which isn't necessarily the case. For as long as Black people have been in America, we've constantly been told that change is coming. We've been told that if we just wait and keep the faith, all the injustices done to our people will be corrected. That hope springs eternal because He's coming back to save us all. I personally believe this mindset can be especially damaging to the Black community because it takes the work that needs to happen to address mental health and places it in the hands of a deity that may or may not exist. And if it does exist, it hadn't really shown any semblance of love to Black people around the world. It's been a 400-year-long whirlwind of pain, struggle, and more pain. I've often said that hope, not love, is the strongest force on earth. That if you give people hope that something better is coming, they will hold on to whatever you tell them to. And that's sadly what religion has done to Black people. It's given our people hope that better is coming, even though there's not a lot of evidence to actually believe that's the case. So the power structure in America never changes because it never really has to. We as Black Americans believe in karma and that God will bring down His vengeance on those who have wronged us. And meanwhile, the same people stay in power, keep the same systems that negatively impact Black lives and the mental state of Black people here in America because there's never a shift or a true revolution of values. I'm not saying that being religious is inherently bad. Hell, that's not even what I'm trying to argue. But what I am saying is that people, specifically Black people who overly rely on religion, which in most cases is Christianity, tend to attribute all the good in their lives to God and all the bad stuff is on them, or worse, the devil. Get a new job, get a new car, get a promotion, graduate college, do anything good at all, it's immediately thank you Jesus. And when it's bad, I've heard the most random nonsensical things get blamed on the devil. That kind of thinking, compounded with the deep fear of hell that many Black people have, makes it where they don't want to or can't reach out for fear of being chastised or having people offer to pray for them, which can feel cold and uncaring when mental issues like depression arises because it doesn't involve boots on the ground work. I've heard some people say that God will get them through it, and if not, it's because they're not doing something right. It's on them. He's the perfect being. How could it be Him? And you know, sometimes what they need is not the religion spiel, but advice or therapy, and in my personal case, medication. I didn't want to turn this into a Black people need to leave religion section of the video because that's a separate topic for another time, but I do think it's worth noting that the relationship between religion and Black lives in America are seemingly intertwined and not always in a good way. I know I'll have some people say that it's not the religion that is doing that, it's the people, because again, the deity is perfect. It's the humans that follow it, and maybe it is. But maybe the thing you're holding on to is
sometimes really toxic, cold, and
callous, and you only follow it because you're indoctrinated to follow it from a young age, and maybe...
Another video, another time. Moving on. I know, speaking from a Black and male perspective, and you knew this was coming, toxic masculinity is another reason why many Black males don't ask for help when having a mental crisis. I know we've personally all seen that stuff happen firsthand far too many times. Look at the men in your life. Be honest with yourself. How many of them feel like they have to perform acts of masculinity for fear of being looked down on, for fear of being called soft, or worse, at least in the time that I grew up?
A homosexual. Oh my God.
It took years for me to finally start taking medication for my mental health, and a lot of it, unbeknownst to my family, stemmed from my fear of looking soft or not being man enough. I've always heard since I was a child to man up. I was expected to white knuckle through the pain, the fear, the anger, even when that stuff led to me wanting to take my own life and attempting to, or lashing out at others. I was suffering every day, but hey, as long as I put on my brave face and powered through, I was strong. Even if I was weak in the place where it counted the most. I didn't ask for help. I didn't have to. I was expected to go it alone. Eventually, I got older and learned that asking for help wasn't a weakness. It was actually a strength. To go against all my programming I had learned my entire life from other Black men was a strength that was and still is immeasurable. But I also grew up in the age where being soft and tender, or showing sadness, fear, worry, anxiety, or any other emotion that wasn't happiness or anger got you called a pussy, me a girl, bitch, weak, and several other more homophobic slurs that I won't say here because they're hurtful to our brothers and sisters in the LGBTQIA+ community. I stand in solidarity with them, and I know that in the community and in healthcare, they're often overlooked twice. Once for being black, and then again for being LGBTQIA+. Hell, it's a full-blown 3 times if you happen to be a woman, which is another thing. We have to, as a collective, do better with how we treat and protect women and our LGBTQIA+ family in the community. For all the good that BLM does to raise awareness in the world about police brutality, it often feels like it solely covers unarmed black men who were shot, brutalized, and killed, but seemingly ignores the numerous instances of where black women, black trans people, or anyone else that isn't a cis black man are brutalized and killed by police. We have to be just as willing to hold it down and go to war for our black women as they are when it comes to our black men. If we truly are all we have, then we have to make damn sure that we take care of everyone in the community, not just some of the people. The only way out of the storm is through solidarity and unity within ourselves. And we all know better, so we all need to do better. All in on this, and this is to anyone watching the video. If you need help, if you need assistance, please don't do what I did and be afraid to reach out. It's not weak to do something that can or may literally save your life. So if you need it, go get it. Period. I'll leave links to places you can reach out, and specifically because the nature of this video, I'll link to articles that outline resources that are specifically for black people / people of color. Up next, Hollywood. Don't think I'm not coming for that ass, because I am. Hollywood and the films they put out have a lot to answer for. One of those things is, and it's something that I find utterly disgusting, is that Hollywood loves showing black trauma. Am I the only one who's noticed that? Like, I can't be, right? And that's if they fucking bother showing black people in film with mental health issues at all. Despite the fact that black Americans are more likely to have mental health issues, face psychiatric hospitalizations, and attempt suicide. Think about many of the stories about the black experience Hollywood and film puts out, and then think about just how many of those films feature a cavalcade of trauma. 12 Years a Slave, The Color Purple, The Help, Django Unchained, Just Mercy, Precious, a lot of the Medea franchise,
which also features the religion aspect of this.
Don't get me wrong, some of these films are fucking amazing. In fact, in my personal opinion, all of these are great except the Medea franchise, but even it has its place. But how many movies, black movies, are centered around some sort of trauma or pain? Oftentimes in those depictions, treatment is rarely, if ever, discussed, offered, or shown. They don't mind showing the trauma of the black experience here in America, but don't bother showing the recovery or the path it takes to get there. Black people have a wide variety of stories, backgrounds, and makeups, and so instead of Hollywood continuously bankrolling and film creators telling these stories that are filled with trauma and pain, a pain that we are all too familiar with and aware of, they have to do better at showcasing reality. Black reality. That reality isn't all doom and gloom. It's joyful, happy, brave, strong, courageous, and sometimes scary. Filmmakers have a lot to answer for and a lot of growing to do when it comes to their depiction of black people in general, and specifically when it comes to dealing with black people with mental illness issues. They also have a lot to answer for when it comes to black dating as well, especially interracially. Can anyone please explain why Hollywood gets all weird about featuring a black American man and his primary love interest is a white American woman in a blockbuster film? Because the last one I remember is Bird Box,
Which, it wasn't a blockbuster film as the budget was only $19 million and they killed off the black guy.
and the one before that was what? Save the Last Dance? Hollywood doesn't seem to want to show that relationship in the films that generate the most money, even though among dating and marriage pairs, it's statistically the second most likely to happen. I know some of the ones you're gonna name already. I do. You'll name a ton of the Will Smith movies that is a moment type thing. But you might want to check who his primary love interest is in those films, and how she's almost always exclusively Latina or usually a foreign white woman. Margot Robbie and Charlize Theron immediately come to mind. I'm not really going anywhere with that. It's just something that I've noticed that was weird when it comes to Hollywood and film. Anyway, Hollywood has a lot to answer for, and we as consumers need to demand more stories about black people that aren't centered in some sort of trouble, violence, trauma, or the combination of all three. You love to steal the culture, but you can't show it in a positive manner? Do better, Hollywood. Do fucking better. Anyway, somewhere in my ramblings, I think I made some solid points of how the state of the world, the racism, bigotry, discrimination, entertainment, toxic masculinity, isolation, and religion all play a part as to why the state of black mental health and how much people care about it is in. All of these things play a part in breaking down why mental health in our community needs to be a bigger talking point, a much bigger talking point, how we need real-world action and legislation to make things better for our communities and our loved ones. We are constantly fighting in this country just to be equal. Fighting a battle with our own minds shouldn't have to be one that we face alone, or worse, not at all. All of this is then further compounded by the fact that 2020 has been the worst fucking year. With coronavirus and the underwhelming American response to it, the constant racism, repeated police brutality and shootings, the rioting and looting in response to it, and the fact that we, as black people, have had some pretty massive celebrity deaths, namely Kobe Bryant and Chadwick Boseman just recently. I'm also aware that suicide can tend to spike after tragic deaths such as those, which is partly why I made this video. And some people will say stuff like,
You didn't even know them, or why does it matter? People die all the time.
but parasocial relationships like we had with Kobe and Chadwick Boseman are just as important to people as real personal ones are. Black kids lost both a sports icon in Kobe who embodied passion, hard work, and dedication, and a real-life black superhero who worked through all his pain and adversity in Chadwick Boseman. So please check on your friends, especially your black ones, because so many of them really are not okay, and they aren't getting the care, support, or love that they need, and that's not okay. And as a closing note, if you haven't already deduced where I stand by now, to be 100% clear and transparent, Black Lives Matter. But expanding on that, Black lives being healthy matters even more so. Hey, that's all I have for today. If you liked the video, thought it was good, then share the video. Leave a like as it really helps the channel grow. I know this was a heavy topic, and to some, it'll be a reason that they stop watching my future videos forever. But to those people, I say,
Alright, bye.
anyway, thanks for stopping by. This is your Warden Psychosis. I'm out.